Secretary of Defense surrounded by 20 doctors, but a female soldier spots what they all missed. The night began with flashing sirens and hurried footsteps. The Secretary of Defense, Richard Kane, was rushed into a military hospital, his life hanging by a thread. 20 of the nation's most brilliant doctors swarmed around him, armed with the latest technology, their voices rising with certainty. Yet as the seconds ticked by, confusion deepened. Each attempt failed. Kane's power could command armies, but not even his authority could force his body to obey. And in the corner of that crowded room stood a young soldier, Elena Torres, silent, unseen, treated as background noise. She wasn't supposed to matter here, but her eyes caught something no one else dared to notice. A detail so small it seemed invisible, yet devastating enough to decide between life and death. Before we continue, subscribe to our channel, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. More gripping stories of courage and defiance are coming your way, and you don't want to miss the next revelation. What happened next would shatter pride, expose arrogance, and prove that sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest truths. And it all began the moment Kane's arrogance collided with Elena's silent courage. Richard Kane, the Secretary of Defense, arrived at the military hospital under flashing lights and whispered orders. His convoy cut through the night like a blade, black cars rolling in silence until doors slammed and agents rushed him inside. Kane was pale, his jaw clenched. But even in his weakness, arrogance clung to him like armor. He barked commands to the 20 doctors waiting in white coats, insisting they solve his condition at once. To them, he was not just a patient. He was power itself. The room grew tense as every gaze focused on a collapsing figure who demanded control of life and death, even as his own body betrayed him. And in the corner, unnoticed, stood a young soldier, Elena Torres, assigned merely as security. Her presence was irrelevant, or so they thought. The doctor surrounded Kane in a flurry of medical jargon and clipped instructions. Machines beeped, pens scratched on clipboards, and the rhythm of panic began to build. Kane, drenched in sweat, still managed to sneer at their hesitation. "You are the best in the nation," he rasped. "Do not fail me." No one dared contradict him. Elena kept her back straight, eyes sharp, watching details others ignored. She wasn't a doctor, wasn't supposed to speak. But something about the way his chest rose and fell made her instincts tighten. It was subtle, a flicker of recognition she couldn't yet name, but it set her apart from the crowd that only saw numbers and charts. The soldier saw a man, and something they all missed. For Kane, humiliation was worse than pain. Even while trembling, he tried to project authority, demanding silence when a nurse spoke too loudly, glaring at a doctor who dared to hesitate. His reputation had been built on fear, and even now he clung to it. But the cracks were visible. His hand trembled when he reached for water. His lips quivered after each command. To the doctors, it was illness. To Elena, it was fear disguised as control. She had seen it in combat, when men pretended bravery but were seconds away from collapse. The Secretary of Defense was no different, though none would dare say it aloud. Elena stood by the door, her presence as invisible as the shadow cast on the wall. She was trained to observe, to anticipate threats, to read movements others ignored. But here, her role was reduced to silence. Doctors bustled past her, never acknowledging the soldier who stood guard. It wasn't disrespect, it was dismissal. Soldiers didn't save lives in this room, medicine did. Yet as Kane's face twisted in pain, Elena's eyes narrowed on a detail small enough to slip past 20 doctors. A detail that made her heartbeat quicken. The hospital's fluorescent lights hummed overhead, adding to the suffocating atmosphere. Sweat beaded on Kane's forehead as he shifted on the gurney. He demanded answers, demanded results, demanded what the doctors could not give. They ran test after test, each one inconclusive. Frustration thickened the air. Elena's gaze darted between monitors and the man himself, realizing something wasn't aligning. It wasn't the machines that revealed the truth. It was Kane's body language, his subtle reactions, the way his skin flushed at the wrong times. But what could a soldier say among 20 experts? Richard's pride was a fortress, one he believed no illness could breach. "Do your jobs," he snapped, though his voice cracked on the last word. The doctors pressed harder, flipping charts, muttering possibilities. But Elena's mind wasn't distracted by theories. She focused on rhythm, on timing, on patterns in the smallest gestures. She noticed the moment his hand twitched when a nurse adjusted the floor. A memory surfaced. Training exercises where a simple oversight cost lives. Her pulse quickened, but her lips remained sealed. She was a soldier in a battlefield of arrogance, where silence was expected. The first doctor leaned back, frustrated. "We've tried everything," he whispered to his colleague. The words weren't meant for Kane's ears, but he heard them. Fury blazed in his eyes, though his body weakened further. Elena saw the disconnect. Anger fueling a man collapsing under its weight. Doctor saw symptoms. She saw signals. Each second deepened her certainty, though doubt gnawed at her. Could she really be right? Could a soldier see what 20 trained specialists missed? The thought pressed heavier on her chest than the rifle slung across her back. Moments stretched into an unbearable rhythm. Kane's arrogance filled the silence, yet beneath it was fragility. The doctors pushed, the machines beeped, and Elena's instincts screamed louder. She wasn't supposed to interfere. She wasn't supposed to think beyond orders. Yet every fiber of her training told her this wasn't just illness. Something vital was slipping through their fingers, unnoticed. She clenched her fist behind her back, fighting the urge to step forward. The question gnawed at her, if no one else speaks, should I? And then came the micro cliffhanger. Kane's breathing faltered for a split second, a rhythm offbeat and alarming. The doctor scribbled, adjusting monitors, but Elena's eyes widened. She had seen this before, in men whose lives ended in seconds because no one noticed soon enough. A soldier's instinct cut through the fog of medicine and power. Her throat tightened with the words she wanted to say, but silence pinned her to the wall. For now, the room became a battlefield of intellect, each doctor eager to prove their brilliance. They argued in hushed tones, prescribing scanned injections and tests that came back empty. Kane's frustration echoed like thunder, shaking the fragile confidence of the experts. He clung to authority even as his pulse weakened, demanding results none could provide. Elena, stationed by the door, watched the storm unfold with disciplined stillness. She noted the slight tremor in his left hand, a twitch ignored by every physician. To her, it was more than random weakness. It was a signal. Yet she remained silent, torn between instinct and obedience. The micro gancho lingered. How long could silence shield her before it doomed him? As minutes stretched, Kane's arrogance erupted. He pointed a trembling finger at Elena. "You, stand straighter. Don't just stare like a useless recruit." His voice cracked, but his authority crushed the room into silence. Laughter flickered among the doctors, not at him, but at her humiliation. Elena's jaw tightened, her eyes steady, refusing to flinch. She had faced worse in training fields, but the sting cut deeper when it came from a nation's most powerful man. She swallowed the urge to respond, yet her mind sharpened. The insult wasn't just humiliation, it gave her resolve. She would not allow arrogance to dictate life and death. The first physician administered a powerful sedative, confident it would stabilize Kane. Instead, his breathing grew shallow, erratic, dangerously uneven. Monitors blared in warning. The doctors scrambled, covering panic with jargon, their prestige crumbling before the evidence. Elena's pulse raced as she stepped forward instinctively, then froze. Speaking would mean ridicule, maybe punishment. But holding back meant watching a man slip further into collapse. The weight of choice pressed down like armor too heavy to carry. Many twists. The soldier who was silenced now stood closest to the truth. Dr. Hayes barked over the chaos, his authority as sharp as Kane's. "No interruptions. No distractions. We know what we're doing." His glare swept across the room, daring anyone to defy him. Elena shifted her stance, hands clenched, her silence burning hotter than fire. She wasn't a doctor, but she had seen soldiers die for mistakes just as obvious. Every instinct screamed at her to break protocol. Yet the voices of authority echoed louder, smothering her courage. The micro gancho sharpened. What happens when those sworn to save lives blind themselves to the obvious? Kane groaned, his body jerking under the strain. His pride refused to yield, even as his chest rattled with shallow gasps. He raised his chin, forcing out words drenched in disdain. Pathetic, 20 doctors, and none of you can handle a simple condition. The insult sliced deeper than his failing lungs, cutting into the credibility of the entire team. Elena's eyes locked on his chest movements, the irregular rise and fall, the discoloration near his lips. To her, the evidence was clear, but doubt gnawed at her mind. What if she was wrong? What if speaking destroyed her career and the secretary died anyway? Dr. Reed hesitated, her eyes darting toward Elena as though sensing the soldier's turmoil. For the first time, someone in the room seemed to notice the tension in her stare. Reed's lips parted, but Hayes silenced her with a wave. "Focus on the patient," he ordered, clinging to control as it slipped through his fingers. Elena exhaled slowly, heart pounding. That brief look from Reed sparked a dangerous thought. Maybe she wasn't entirely alone. Mini twist. An ally had emerged, but only if courage outweighed fear. The doctors moved Kane onto another bed, preparing invasive procedures. His skin glistened with sweat, his breath faltered like a candle in the wind. Elena's thoughts spiraled into memory. Comrades lost in the field because no one listened to quiet observer who noticed the small things. Her fists tightened, nails pressing into her palms. The air reeked of arrogance, sterile and suffocating. And in that poisoned silence, Elena realized she was holding the only truth that could cut through it. But truth was dangerous when it came from the wrong mouth. As another monitor blared and Kane's face twisted in agony, Elena's gaze burned into the scene. The soldier's instinct and the woman's courage collided inside her chest, warring with the discipline that chained her tongue. The micro cliffhanger hit. Kane's life was slipping by the second, the doctors blinded by pride, and the only one who saw the answer was a very soldier he called useless. Would she risk everything to be heard, or remain silent until silence became betrayal? The atmosphere inside the hospital room thickened to suffocation. Every second was a countdown. Kane's body convulsed with shallow, erratic breaths, while the doctors exchanged panicked glances hidden behind forced confidence. They ordered more machines, more drugs, anything to preserve their authority. Elena's eyes sharpened on the secretary's face, noticing the slight swelling near his throat, the way his lips flushed purple. It was not random. It was reaction. She had seen this in the field when a soldier collapsed after exposure to a hidden allergen. The realization struck her like a bullet. Kane wasn't dying from mystery, but from something simple overlooked, and still silence chained her tongue. The question gnawed at her. Would anyone listen if she spoke? Dr. Hayes slammed his clipboard down. "Prepare the crash cart." His booming voice filled the room, silencing every whisper. The doctors obeyed, moving with robotic precision, yet uncertainty crackled in their movements. Elena stepped half a pace forward before freezing. She could almost hear Kane's words replaying in her mind. Useless recruit. The humiliation wasn't just insult. It was a command to stay silent. Her training urged discipline, but her instincts screamed defiance. Mini twist. Her fear of authority was colliding with her duty to act. As the team surrounded Kane, Dr. Reed once again caught Elena's stare. This time, Reed hesitated longer, her lips tightening as though she, too, sensed the overlooked truth. But Hayes's glare cut through the moment. "No distractions," he snapped. Elena clenched her fists. If she spoke now, Reed might back her, but the weight of 20 other doctors would crush them both. Still, the image of Kane's face, losing color with every second, became unbearable. Micro gancho. The soldier's silence was no longer safe. It was turning into betrayal. The monitors shrieked as Kane's vitals plummeted. A doctor injected another drug, but his condition worsened instantly. The room erupted into frantic orders, yet Elena's focus tightened on the one overlooked cause. She whispered under her breath, too soft for anyone to hear. "It's an allergic reaction." Her heart hammered, palms slick with sweat. She had spoken the truth, but only to herself. The courage hadn't yet reached her voice. The cliffhanger deepened. When lives hung by seconds, could she afford silence 1 second longer? Kane's pride, even on the brink of death, lashed out in fury. He forced his eyes open, glaring weakly at the doctors. "Incompetent, all of you." His words trailed off into coughs, each one sharper than the last. Elena's chest tightened. He was drowning in his own arrogance, refusing to admit weakness, and they were letting him. It wasn't just his life at stake. It was the weight of the office he represented. Her throat burned with unsaid words. She knew if she spoke, the room would turn against her. But wasn't silence worse? Hayes raised his voice again, pushing for invasive procedures. "Scalpel. We'll open his airway if we must." Gasps rippled through the staff. Elena's stomach twisted. It was wrong. This wasn't obstruction. It was poisoning from within. Her mind screamed for action, but her body froze under the crushing weight of hierarchy. She was trained to obey, but she also carried the oath to protect. The contradiction tore at her, obedience or truth, which was betrayal. Mini twist. The soldier realized the system built to protect lives was about to end one. The young doctor, Reed, finally broke her silence. "Sir, something doesn't add up." Hayes cut her off instantly. "Enough." His voice cracked with fear disguised as authority. Elena's heart pounded louder than the machine's. For a fleeting second, she saw herself in Reed, a woman's voice smothered beneath arrogance. Their eyes locked again, and this time Elena recognized it. An unspoken plea for courage. The micro-gancho twisted deeper. If Reed risked defiance, could Elena stand idle any longer? The final moment came like lightning. Kane's chest seized, his body jerking violently as alarms wailed. Doctors scrambled with instruments, chaos exploding around the bed. Elena's body moved on instinct, one step forward, breath caught in her throat. This was it, the edge between silence and salvation. Her eyes blazed with clarity. She knew what no one else saw, what could end the spiral. And yet, the cliffhanger struck. Would she speak now, shattering the chains of hierarchy, or let the secretary slip into death under the weight of silence? The alarm screamed louder than the doctors themselves. Kane's body convulsed, his chest heaving in ragged desperation. The team shouted overlapping orders, but panic blurred into chaos. In that storm of arrogance and fear, Elena's voice finally broke free. "Stop!" she shouted, sharp and commanding. The room froze as if struck by lightning. For the first time, every eye turned not to the secretary, not to Hayes, but to the soldier at the door. Silence fell so heavy it cut through the machinery. Elena's heart raced, but her voice steadied. "It's an allergic reaction. Look at the swelling. Look at his throat. You're killing him." The cliffhanger snapped into focus. Would anyone dare believe her? Dr. Hayes scoffed, his face red with outrage. A soldier? Diagnosing the Secretary of Defense. His voice dripped with contempt, but beneath it trembled fear. The doctors shifted uneasily, torn between authority and the undeniable clarity in Elena's words. Dr. Reed stepped closer, eyes darting between Kane's condition and Elena's steady gaze. "She might be right," Reed whispered, too quiet for Hayes, but loud enough to shift the balance. Mini twist. A single ally emerged in the silence, validating the soldier's defiance. The air thickened with suspense, obedience to arrogance or surrender to truth. Kane's breathing worsened, his lips turning blue. Hayes barked, "Ignore her. Prepare the incision." But his authority no longer echoed with certainty. It cracked under the weight of reality. Elena stepped forward, her boots hitting the floor with defiance that echoed louder than his orders. "He doesn't need surgery. He needs epinephrine." The word hung like a blade, slicing through doubt. Doctors froze, their training colliding with their fear of hierarchy. The Secretary of Defense was slipping away, and the only lifeline came from the voice he had called useless. The tension broke when Reed grabbed a syringe. "We have epinephrine," she said, louder this time, her hands trembling but firm. Hayes lunged to stop her, but Elena's stance blocked his path, her uniform suddenly carrying a new weight, authority born of truth, not rank. "You'll kill him if you cut," Elena said, her voice sharp as steel. For a moment, time fractured, arrogance against instinct, power against courage. The cliffhanger deepened. Would Reed dare to act, or would Hayes' shadow smother her courage again? "Kane," weak but conscious enough to hear, turned his furious gaze on Elena. A soldier ordering my doctors? His voice cracked, choked by his failing lungs. Fury laced every word, but behind it was desperation. His pride was bleeding, collapsing with his body. Elena didn't flinch. She met his gaze head-on, eyes steady, jaw unshaken. "With respect, sir," she said, her voice low but unyielding. "Your pride won't save you. This will." The room shivered under the weight of truth, spoken where it was least welcome. A ripple of doubt coursed through the medical team. One doctor muttered, "The symptoms, they fit." Another leaned closer to Kane, examining the swelling with new eyes. The fortress of arrogance began to crumble, brick by brick, as Elena's words broke through their denial. Hayes's voice rose louder, desperate. "Don't listen to her." But desperation made him weak, his authority unraveling in front of those he once commanded. Many twists. The soldier's defiance was spreading, dismantling the hierarchy in real time. Reed's hand shook, syringe poised. Elena stood by her side, a soldier turned shield, daring anyone to interfere. Hayes's face burned with rage, but the tide had shifted. Doctors no longer looked at him. They looked at Elena. They looked at the soldier who had seen what none of them did. The air vibrated with the possibility of change, of truth overriding fear. Yet the cliffhanger remained. Would courage triumph in time to save Kane's life, or would hesitation seal his fate? And in the center of it all, Kane's body betrayed his pride. His chest tightened, breath shallower, life slipping away second by second. Elena's words cut through the chaos like orders on a battlefield. "Now or he dies." The ultimatum hung heavier than rank, heavier than fear. The doctors hovered, Reed trembling but resolute. The final seconds stretched into eternity. Would they obey Hayes, the arrogant authority, or Elena, the soldier who saw the truth? The screen of the story darkened at that edge, dragging the audience to the brink of resolution. The moment of decision shattered when Dr. Reed plunged a syringe into Kane's arm. Time seemed to stop, the room holding its breath as the epinephrine surged through his body. For one endless heartbeat, nothing changed. Kane's lips remained purple, his chest rattled in shallow gasps. Doubt rippled across the room. Had the soldier been wrong? Elena's jaw tightened, her heart pounding against her ribs. And then the twist. Kane's chest rose with fuller breath, his lips regaining color. The monitors steadied. Relief rippled through the doctors. Disbelief painted across their faces. Elena's instinct had pierced through arrogance and saved a life. Kane coughed violently, his body reacting as strength began to return. His eyes, still sharp despite the ordeal, flickered toward Elena with fury and humiliation intertwined. The man who had called her useless was alive because of her defiance. The silence in the room was deafening, not from respect, but from the collapse of certainty. 20 doctors had missed it. One soldier had seen it. Hayes's face drained of color, his authority crumbling under the undeniable truth. Many twists. The man who silenced her now stood silent himself. Hayes tried to recover, raising his voice. Coincidence. Nothing more. But the words rang hollow, met with stares that carried no conviction. The doctors looked to Reed, who confirmed firmly it was anaphylaxis. She saved him. The declaration broke the last wall of denial. Hayes's voice faltered, his command reduced to whispers no one obeyed. Elena didn't smile, didn't gloat. Her face remained steady, her posture firm. This wasn't victory, it was duty. And yet, the emotional reward was undeniable. She had turned the tide with a single truth spoken at the right moment. Kane, still recovering, forced himself upright. A soldier giving orders to doctors? His pride bled into every word, but his voice carried less venom now. He was a man humiliated, caught between gratitude and rage. Elena's eyes locked with his, unflinching. "I didn't give orders," she said calmly. "I gave you life." The words cut sharper than any scalpel. A micro gancho sharpened. Would the secretary acknowledge her, or bury the truth beneath his pride? The doctors stepped back, their authority fractured. Some looked at Elena with awe, others with shame. Reed stood beside her, no longer trembling. her resolve fortified by the soldier's courage. Hayes slumped in defeat, realizing he no longer commanded respect. The hierarchy of power had inverted, at least for this moment. Many twists. The soldier was no longer invisible. She had become the center of the room, the voice no one could ignore. But in Elena's eyes, something deeper burned. She replayed every step of the night, the wrong medications, the reckless haste, the arrogance that blinded them. And she realized it might not have been incompetence alone. The pattern of errors, the insistence on invasive procedures. It smelled of negligence, perhaps even intent. Her instincts told her the story wasn't over. She had saved Kane's life, but she had also uncovered a darker truth waiting in the shadows. Micro Gancho, salvation revealed a new enemy. Kane shifted uncomfortably, his pride wounded more deeply than his body. For a fleeting second, his gaze betrayed fear. He knew it too. His survival exposed weakness, and weakness in his position was dangerous. Elena caught it, the flicker of vulnerability behind his scowl. He was alive, but the foundations of his authority had cracked. Her words had not just saved him. They had changed the balance of power. The Secretary of Defense now owed his life to the soldier he had humiliated. The cliffhanger deepened. What would he do with that truth? The room settled into uneasy silence. Machines beeped steadily again, but no one dared speak. Elena exhaled slowly, her heartbeat steady now, though her mind burned with questions. She had saved the most powerful man in the room, but she had also exposed the fragility of the system that served him. And as Kane's eyes bore into hers, a final micro-cliffhanger struck. This battle was won, but had she just ignited a war far larger than herself? Kane lay back against the pillows, color returning to his face, but his pride bled heavier than his body. The room held its breath, waiting for his words. He glanced at the doctors, then at Elena. Silence stretched like a blade. Finally, with strained dignity, he muttered, "You saved me." The words were not gratitude, but admission, forced through clenched teeth. Elena nodded once, not seeking approval, only acknowledging the truth. Her composure was unwavering. She had not fought for recognition, only for life. Yet the weight of her defiance lingered like smoke in the air, undeniable, unforgettable. Dr. Reed stepped forward, her voice steady now. If she hadn't spoken, we'd be preparing his funeral, not his recovery. The words broke the silence further, reshaping the narrative. Doctors shifted uneasily, realizing they had been complicit in Hayes's arrogance. Hayes, pale and defeated, stood in the corner, stripped of authority. His voice had lost its power. The hierarchy that once towered over Elena had collapsed before her simple, devastating truth. A soldier, overlooked and humiliated, had outshone them all. Kane's gaze lingered on Elena, fire and humiliation burning together. He wanted to reclaim power, to assert dominance, but the truth had robbed him of that weapon. She had not challenged his authority. She had saved it. Without her, the Secretary of Defense would be a corpse. The contradiction poisoned his pride. To punish her would be to punish the reason he lived. For the first time in years, Richard Kane was forced into silence by someone he had dismissed as beneath him. The irony was brutal, and it cut deeper than any wound. Elena held his gaze without flinching, her voice calm and steady, cut through the thick air. Sometimes, the smallest details saved the greatest lives. It wasn't a boast, it was a reminder. The line landed heavier than any accusation. Reed looked at her with awe, the other doctors with shame. In that moment, the soldier stood taller than the secretary, her uniform carrying more weight than his title. The reward wasn't applause or praise. It was justice. Justice that the unseen voice had become the one that mattered most. The room slowly emptied, leaving Kane with his thoughts and Elena still standing guard. She hadn't moved, hadn't sought release. Her duty hadn't ended with saving him. She understood what had happened tonight was larger than survival. It was revelation. A system built on arrogance had almost destroyed its leader. And the irony was that the one dismissed as irrelevant was the one who restored order. She felt no triumph, only clarity. The war was not over. It had merely shifted battlegrounds. Hay slipped out quietly, shame burning his face. Reed lingered near the doorway, offering Elena a nod of respect before following the others. For the first time, the soldier was not invisible. She was not dismissed. She was seen, and that visibility was dangerous. For her, for Kane, for the system itself. The truth she carried was simple, but its consequences were seismic. She had defied the hierarchy and won, but the victory exposed cracks that others might seek to exploit. Kane turned his head, watching her with a mix of resentment and fear. He had lived because of her, but he understood what that meant. If word spread, his image as unbreakable would fracture. His enemies would circle, sensing weakness. And all because of a soldier who refused to stay silent. For a man who ruled by pride, that was a wound deeper than any illness. Elena saw in his eyes, but she didn't flinch. She had done her duty. What came next was no longer hers to control. As dawn's first light bled to the hospital windows, Elena exhaled. She had stood against 20 doctors, against arrogance itself, and held her ground. She hadn't sought to change the world, only to save a life. But sometimes saving a life changed the world anyway. Her story would not be written in medals or speeches. It would live in whispers, in the quiet respect of those who saw what she had done. And that was enough. For now, the final micro cliffhanger. The soldier walked away undefeated, but the system she shook would not forget her name. And so the story closes, not with a roar of applause, but with the quiet victory of truth over pride. Elena Torres, the soldier no one listened to, had become the voice that saved the Secretary of Defense. Her defiance was simple but devastating. Her silence had become power. And as the audience reflects, the call extends beyond the story. If this moment gripped you, subscribe, like, and share. More untold battles of courage are on the way. Support our channel and join as a member. Together we can keep these stories alive. Don't miss the next revelation that will shake you as deeply as this one.